The risk is not immediate failure. I did not assume I would immediately fail. The risk is slow failure. We believe that VC is more about the ground game than the air game. Market is changing, so the reality itself is changing. That is what I meant by there's a human at the other side of every equation.
Superclusters is where we demystify the secrets, stories, and tactics behind the money that moves the venture capital world. Merry Christmas, Superclusters fans. Stockings up, mistletoe's down, and wishing you a whole lot of presents around the Christmas tree. And most importantly, the amazing company of friends and family. So there's a Danish word, hygge, and a word I promise for all of our American listeners does not sound the way it is spelled. For those curious, try Hygge. And it stands for the idea of taking time away from the hustle and bustle from our daily lives just to enjoy the company of the people around us and the people we care about, and the warm, fuzzy, cozy feeling that comes with it. Imagine sitting by a campfire late at night with close friends and family, and just enjoying the stories and the company that come with it. Today's episode is just that. So we've done an episode with Jeff and Martin in season 1 as to why an LP would pass on a GP. And our guest today and I sat together and thought, why not do an episode of how and why an LP says yes to a GP, a gift for all of you during this holiday season. So not to bury the lead too much here, for this holiday episode, we have Ben Choi and Nakul Mandan. Ben, as many of you might know, is the managing director of Next Legacy, focused on backing great venture managers and the fund of funds that helps changemakers, philanthropists, and athletes get a seat at the venture table. Ben is also our first three-peater guest, and as you might guess, someone who's deeply special to me, as well as the podcast. Nakul is the founding partner of Audacious Ventures, the firm that backs ambitious founders and helps them build an ambitious team. Their in-house recruiting team is second to none, and you'll hear exactly how this is built later in this episode. Prior to Audacious, Nakul was a senior partner at Lightspeed, as well as an investor in Battery Ventures. He was early into Gainsight, which was acquired a couple of years back for $1.1 billion, and that's billion with the letter B as in boy. And he's also a trusted board member and investor in many a company, which I'd highly recommend checking out on his LinkedIn. So today's goal is to dig deep in why, Ben, you chose to invest in Nakul, MZ, and Sam at Audacious, and to uncover, to the best of my ability, the early days of Audacious and how you two first met. And while I will do my best, I hope the two of you will call my bluff if you've noticed. I failed to do my hours in the gym. But not to belabor the point any longer, I can't spell how excited I am for this holiday special. Ben, Nakul, happy holidays, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, very excited to be here.
I say this a lot, and Ben, you're no stranger to this, but I say that we can start in a lot of places. So if I might paint this episode with broad strokes, I'd love to start in the early days of your lives, and if I might, a peek behind the hood between the person you were before and the people you are today. So, Nakul, I'll start with you. Feel free to point me whatever direction makes sense, but in the homework I did prefacing this conversation, there was a recurring theme in your life outside of tech, venture, India, and the next most followed topic that you have on your Quora since you joined in 2010 happened to be the topic of The Dark Knight and Batman. So, Nakul, could you tell me about your fascination about The Dark Knight?
It's a good place to start. I'd say part of that may have been just a timing thing. I am a huge fan of The Dark Knight, and actually there's a full figurine of Batman. I'll just show it to you guys right here in my office. So if you can see this. So I am a huge fan of the Batman. And, this was a gift from my wife because she knows how big of a fan I am. And so I think the Quora fascination may have been that at that time, around 2010, 12, I was obsessed with Quora. I thought it was the best thing to satisfy human curiosity. I would put up a lot of questions there. I would also put up a lot of anonymous questions to actually figure out my job, because at that time I was new in the US. And so I would put up anonymous questions around how do restaurant managers use software to run their business better? How do construction people? And the answers that would come, I'd call those companies. But just back on the question of Batman, I think the, so one is that the entire arc of the Dark Knight story is amazing, and Christopher Nolan's trilogy made it a very real, more than a superhero movie. So I thought that was partly the timing thing, that plus Quora. Uh, but the other thing that I personally find amazing about that story is that Batman is kind of one of the few superheroes who's a self-made superhero. So, Superman was born Superman, and Spider-Man and all these other people, they are either gods or they have some explicit superpower, or physical or biological superpower. But Batman just chose to be Batman because he felt like he needed to solve some problem. And so that just fundamentally, in my mind, elevates him over everybody else.
I'm curious for you, and then we're going completely off script here because I sent you both a set of questions, and as you're talking about Batman, it's too good not to talk about, which is how often does the story arc related to like scar tissue being the impetus of an origin story versus inspiration, motivation, vision being the impetus for an origin story? How often do those things come at balance for you, and what are you more gravitated towards? It sounds like a lot of it more is like, this happened to me and I need to prove someone something myself wrong. Am I right in that assessment?
I think I am open-minded to both when I talk to entrepreneurs. I just think that if you had to, there are probably more people who are extremely driven by some scar tissue than motivation in life. I would love to find more mission-driven people, and we have backed some of those people. There are fewer of those in enterprise software, at least, right? Like, there's no mission that somebody comes up to build the next applicant tracking system. So often,
you mean people don't want to be that as their like elementary school like dream job?
Yeah. But I think both are valid. The thing we are looking for in these people is this motivation, whatever that is, whether it's driven by a scar tissue or a mission, sustainable through dark days and sustainable through boring times, right? Because there's one which is your back is against the wall and you punch back. Good. That's an important skill. But also there are times when you just have to do the work. It's just boring, right? It's like, and you have to go through periods of drudgery. The fundraising environment went bad. Last 4 years is a great example. Like, economic cycle was in a place where fundraising wasn't exciting, selling to customers wasn't exciting. Sometimes you just have to bear through that because you're on a 20-year journey. So we are looking for people who are on these long journeys. And whatever is the chip we try to assess as to what is the chip on their shoulder or what is the drive to sustain a long ambition, not a quick spurt of inspiration.
I love this analogy. So I don't have a Dark Knight figurine in my room, but I did have a Michael Keaton Batman poster on my walls in high school and middle school. And I think the earlier versions of Batman, he's just like, he uses tools. He's like a rich guy. He's kind of more Tony Stark. Like he's a dilettante, right? And you never see him training. You never see him there's always some second act part, but he's still always the strong guy who comes back. But then Christopher Nolan's version, they spend a lot of time where he's like either doesn't know what he's doing and he's learning, or he actually gets fully broken down, like the whole Bane thing, and then he actually has to work. Like, he gets punched in the face and he doesn't just get right back up. He has to there's a whole process that the great version of actually what I think entrepreneurs think that it's going to be like the Michael Keaton version, and then the good ones actually have to work through the Christopher Nolan version of Batman.
So in that regard, I think of the trilogy, Batman Begins is the underrated version. The trilogy doesn't work without the first one, for me at least. The Dark Knight wouldn't be as good if I didn't have the visuals of the Batman Begins movie.
I completely agree. It reminds me of a Mike Tyson line. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face or punched in the mouth, I think. But I think, to your point, a lot of entrepreneurs think it's going to be this relatively smooth sailing up into the right trajectory. But there are many moments where I heard someone say this once, you need about like 10, 15 miracles to happen during your startup journey. And you're going to be tested in every single one of those times when a miracle needs to happen. Position ourselves a little bit over here in this conversation and to maybe take a step back from maybe the entrepreneurial kind of startup journey talk, which I promise we'll get into in just a sec. But I'm curious for you, Nakul, like, what does one need to appreciate to understand about your childhood to fully appreciate the person you are today?
I'll start by saying I think of my life as pre-25 years of age as one life, and then pretty transformative next 3 years, and post-25 I was a different person. But the ingredients were there earlier than 25. And so probably the most important ingredient there was that started right at the start of my life as my younger brother, who's 2 years younger to me, was born paralyzed from below his waist on day zero, right? And so I grew up in a pretty intense way where I was leading a normal life. I was healthy and everything. But for my brother and my parents, it wasn't a normal life at all. And their challenges, and this was like not like we didn't live in a major city like Delhi or Mumbai. So it was like, if you can imagine 80s and 90s with a paralyzed kid, for my parents, it was a tough journey. And their challenges, while I didn't face them, I was a kid myself, but it was very visible and very visceral for me to see them and my brother's challenges, right? And so I grew up with this quiet intensity and determination that, one day when I grow up, I have to be massively successful. I didn't know what it meant, but I had this deep drive through all the experiences that all the trials of my family have to come through and it all has to be worth it. And I am the source for my family to see that success in their lives, right? And I also sort of had a naive take of life that, one day I'll make a lot of money and it will solve all my family's problems. I call it naive because it's kind of semi-true, but it's never fully true, as you guys know, right? So ambition and intensity were there from a very early point in my life. But I think while those ingredients were there, they were still not enough to equip me for the career I ended up having or wanted. In the sense that I grew up more as a quietly determined, shy person who had big ambitions but didn't know how to carry myself in the world. And so when I got my first job at Deutsche Bank in Mumbai, I arrived there and I saw all these people who speak much more confidently than me, who know how to carry themselves in the world. And I was this shy, awkward person. And candidly, I didn't appreciate the social selling skills or the social skills, the selling skills. I felt like selling felt like a dirty thing to me, right? I felt like I wanted my work to shine. And at some point around 25, I had this realization that either I can continue to have the self-perception that I'm an introverted, shy person, and I will never live the dreams that I have, or I need to transform myself to be the person that then, knows how to carry myself and knows how to sell myself and my dreams and my ambitions in the world. And the next 3 years, then I embraced that wholeheartedly. And, my parents still today think that you used to be so quiet and now you talk all day. Like when they visit me, they're like, this guy's talking all day, every day, and he's long sentences, long paragraphs. They're not used to that even now. So I think of that as a completely different side of me, the person I am today in that way. But the intensity and the ambition were there pretty early on, and it still drives me.
I'm curious for you because you went from in your words, like a shy, introverted individual to someone who speaks a lot more today. Was there a straw that broke the camel's back in terms of that mental gymnastics you had to go through to find out, like, hey, you know what? I can't be the same person as I was yesterday. I need to change the way I act. Was there something like that? Was it at Deutsche Bank? And I'm putting words in your mouth, so feel free to stop me here.
No, it wasn't at Deutsche as much. Actually, were you saying something else?
No. Like, go on. Like, I think you got the essence of the question.
Honestly, it was arriving in Mumbai. And Mumbai is like the New York of India. And suddenly in big cities, it happens here in the US also. Somebody grows outside of Dallas, which would probably be the equivalent of where I grew up. And then you arrive in New York or LA and people dress differently. They're more confident. They're willing to wear their ambition on their sleeve. The way I was brought up, wearing your ambition on your sleeve was thought of as not grounded, right? But if you don't wear your ambition on your sleeve, how will anybody know that you're ambitious, right? If you just are in a quiet corner, how will the world know that you're smart and you have all these ideas and you have philosophies? Nobody will know. And so I don't think it was one day or one moment or one bad incident for me. It was just realizing that I'm going to get left behind. And my dreams are big. I continue to feel even then that my dreams were very big, but I felt that there was a divergence in how I was carrying myself and what those dreams were. And, I just had this realization. I don't know if it was one sudden day or over weeks and months where I was like, need to snap out of it. This is not going to happen by an incremental change. I just need to become the person I need to become the person. It's not, I'm very realist in that way. Like, if I need to get something done, I get it done. I don't overthink it.
I'm curious, Ben, for you, I'm curious how much of this, and as we ease into that part of the conversation, how much of this came out in your first few interactions with Nakul?
It's evident in the first minute you meet Nakul, that intentionality, that intensity, and then over the course of the first conversation, I think Nakul, your journey into venture and to the United States and to Silicon Valley, I think all of that is so much part of your identity and your story, and it all comes through very quickly. So this is, I'm looking forward for Nakul to share more of his story, because it was a big part of how we first got to know each other, and it is a big part of what I see as Nakul's kind of secret to his success.
Ben, I'm curious for you. I want to touch a little bit on your background, and to frequent listeners and viewers of Superclusters, you are no stranger to them. They've heard you twice, and you've been extremely candid in both of those episodes. But I want to touch on an angle that maybe we haven't covered nearly as much in prior episodes, which is like your high school days. And for folks who are curious, season 1, episode 6, I think we talk about your high school days for like literally 30 seconds. Maybe you want the longer than 30-second spiel here. And I promise there's rhyme and reason to this question. But as someone who's known for his charitable work, for not only the Children's Health Council, but also for 8 years as a member of the Chinese Culture Center of San Francisco. And in many ways this is in line with how Next Legacy runs itself. Ben, I want to talk about your teenage years. As someone who grew up youngest of 3, son of a doctor, as well as a nurse, both your older brothers are now in college. Ben, I'm curious for you, you're living the only child dream for the first time. What did high school Ben glean from the work your parents were doing in the community of San Francisco? And how much it was also influenced by your great uncle's work negotiating with the city in 1965?
Wow, deep cut. I appreciate it.
I got you covered.
Yeah. My parents, I think a lot of Nakul's, his own immigrant story, maybe one of the reasons why it resonated with me so much when we first met was there are parallels to my parents' story. Of course, each story is different. My parents came to the U.S. As a doctor and nurse. They had to redo all of their certifications because the British system from Hong Kong isn't recognized here. But I grew up in a small town, Peoria, Illinois. That's where they needed an allergist, and so I was born in Peoria. And once a month on the weekends, my parents would put their 3 boys into the back of the car. We had a lovely childhood in a small town, but they would drive 3 hours up to early on Saturday morning to Chinatown in Chicago, so that they could run a free medical clinic for the Chinatown community. So I grew up with my parents, kind of just seeing their heart for service. We were not a very talkative family, and so I don't actually remember any conversations about why they did that. It's just what they did. So when I was 10, they moved our family to San Francisco for various reasons, but they set up an office near Chinatown because there were no Cantonese-speaking allergists or asthma specialists in San Francisco, which has a massive Cantonese-speaking population. And so my high school experience and our family's chapter there, we understood is because for family, but also to allow my parents to really live out that heart for service, to serve that community. So that's very much kind of my time in San Francisco growing up. We grew up right across the street from the Ferry Building, but back then it was a double-decker freeway. It was a very different version of the Ferry Building than today, and it was importantly a walk away from Chinatown, where my parents were serving the community. So that's my high school experience. You mentioned my great uncle. I didn't know it at the time. I took kung fu lessons and Chinese painting lessons at the local Chinese Culture Center. It was the first Chinese Culture Center started in America, and it started in Chinatown in San Francisco. And it's because I learned later, I joined the board, and only when I joined the board did I learn I had a family connection to the organization. My great uncle was the first retail banker for Chinatown, so he brought retail banking to Chinatown. And this is my great uncle. And there was some developer that was going to build a large parking lot, which is the not the Portsmouth Square, but right across the street. It's the Hilton Hotel there, and it was going to cast a big shadow, literally, over Chinatown. And so he kind of caused a ruckus. Went to the mayor and said, "You've got if you're going to develop this area, you need to create space to also serve the community." And it's probably 65 years ago now that when they got the rights to permit and build that thing, which became a hotel, there's a requirement that they have to have a space for the then first Chinese Culture Center of San Francisco.
That makes a lot of sense. This is why I asked the deep cut questions. And now I feel like I should have asked you this question sooner, because for an episode we recorded not too long ago about firm building and succession planning, for context, Nakul, one of the questions I asked Ben during that recording was, what is the job that goes most unseen by LPs, founders, people external to the organization? And the answer that Ben gave, the job title that was most unseen, was the culture keeper. And so much of this resonates because, Ben, you just said your family wasn't nearly as talkative as maybe some other households were, but at the same time you saw their actions more than you heard their words. And so in many ways, they were the culture keeper for the community and the culture keepers for the family. And so maybe we'll move the needle here in the conversation. I want to come to a point, and as we mentioned earlier, the impetus to this conversation about how you guys first met. I'd love to hear both sides of the story here, but how were each of you connected to each other? Nakul, was it you cold emailing Ben as you broke into VC back in 2006? Or Ben, was it you who's done so much before, and did you pitch to Nakul on a 20-foot billboard in Orchard Road?
Let me go first, because I want to hear Nakul's version. I and my teammates at Next Legacy, we were late to the Nakul game. Nakul was already established by the time we first connected. He had already had a successful career and was a senior partner at Lightspeed. And it was actually a former partner of yours, Sunil, from Battery, who had already started Amplify, and Sunil reached out and offered an introduction. He sang your praises, and that, someone that we respect vouching for Nakul in that case. But that warm introduction, it's a order of magnitude difference than the cold email. The cold email can work too. You never know where the next great opportunity is going to come from. But in that case, it was from Sunil, and then it happened right as COVID started. So when our first years of conversation were all virtual. I know Nakul primarily for his amazing Zoom game, his game background, but that was our first connection. And I actually never asked Nakul what if that was random that Sunil just suggested it, or if there was something else behind it. But that was our original introduction.
Yes, so you're 100% right. It was Sunil. So the timing of it worked out in a way where I'd resigned from Lightspeed many months before COVID, but the timing worked out where I literally was kicking off our first fundraise in the first month of COVID lockdowns, April 2020. It was fucking brutal, just put it lightly. Because, at that time, everybody was worried about kids' schooling and toilet paper. And, the world was just a crazy place in that month. It wasn't as simple as, this event is happening, but let's talk to another new fund, right? So I will say, I relied on a lot of my network to help me with a lot of intros. it became very clear to me within the first few days, maybe a week. It wasn't longer that this is going to be a 10x harder fundraise than I thought it was. And in some ways, like my friends like Semil Shah at Haystack had prepared me, hey, it's going to be tough. And again, he also didn't know about COVID, but he was just preparing me that, hey, none of this is easy. And I'd be like, I've done many things. I'll get it done. Don't worry. As in, like, with your support and other support, I'll get it done. But it became clear. So then I went to Sunil, Ed Sim at Bold Start, Satya Patel at Homebrew, obviously Semil at Haystack. And I went to all my friends and, I asked for those intros and they were very kind to make like tens of intros. So I think I got like 100 plus intros within the first few months. And then of course, we had our first anchor LP come in, and then that kind of creates a flywheel. The thing I'll say is about the legacy first meeting. At that time, you guys were legacy.
Yeah.
One thing that was instantly clear, and which is why I wanted you guys to be involved, was that, of course, look, we are all in a capitalistic business, but you want to make money for purposes that go back to society in productive and hopefully just good ways, humanly good ways. And so for me, that was an instant connection. And even though I'll poke Ben that they didn't convert in Fund 1, I continued building that relationship. And every time I would meet your colleague Jesse and others, I would emphasize that the reason I want legacy and now next legacy is the money is fungible and, we'll get it. It's more because I feel like over time, I want to hopefully make a shitload of money for people who then channel that into good things in the world. And that stood out about legacy from day one in the first meeting.
I'll highlight that even though we had not, we didn't know each other before that process, I know for a fact that when you asked for help from your friends, you had already helped them. This was not the direction of your relationship with them. I know for a fact, and I knew it then even because I had heard about Nakul. We knew Nakul by reputation, but specifically you mentioned Semil, and Semil had actually said that you were somebody who had helped him get started when he started Haystack when you were at Lightspeed. So that I love hearing that because I'm not surprised that you had asked Semil for help here, or you compared notes in the fundraise timeframe because it was. But
I think that's the beauty of Silicon Valley, right? Like, there's no first person who helped somebody. Like, I helped somebody, but I got helped by so many people to be here. It's just insane. It's just this flywheel that keeps helping each other. One day I woke up and this was in April 20, and like Semil made literally 40 intros overnight. I woke up and my new Audacious email was suddenly filled with all these intros. And then Sunil and I chatted, and then, for a week, that thing happened. And then one Sunday, Sunil probably took 2 hours out and he made like 15 intros right there, right? And so people are busy, but they make time to carve out like 1 to 3 hours to help somebody they care about. And that goes around, and hopefully we all keep helping more people who we are empowering.
Nakul, I want to ask you didn't start Audacious to raise money for Audacious. Nobody starts a new firm to go raise money. Talking to LPs is just necessary part of the process. Yeah. And you mentioned that obviously you decided to do this before COVID, and then you went into the process during COVID. Had you known what that process would have been like, would you think you still would have done it at that time and or at any time?
I think I would have definitely done it. There's no question in my mind because, I was doing well at Lightspeed. Hopefully that's not too onerous a statement for me to say, and I just so I got my green card and I waited 6 months and that resigned. So it was a very simple decision. At some level, I wasn't making a decision on the day I got my green card. I had made that decision 10, 20 years ago. Yeah. Because I grew up saying to myself a story of my life that one day I'll start a company and it'll be massively successful. That's how I got into venture. I got into venture thinking I'll do it for 3 years, learn how companies are run, and then start a company of my own. So for me, and then maybe that started as a naive take without me really knowing what it takes to start a company. But when you tell that story to yourself through your 20s and 30s, it becomes the story of your life. And so I think no amount of fear or money, either side could have stopped me. I think my life would be unfulfilled personally for me, if I if I don't build an institution that lasts beyond me. That's something personally very important to me. It's purely personal.
I'm curious, Nakul, if you gave yourself a hypothetical, let's say, deadline or time gate when you were first raising Fund One, in the sense that you left Lightspeed, did you tell yourself, like, I'm giving myself a bandwidth of, let's say, 2 years, and if I can't get this off the ground in 2 years, I'm going to find something else, but eventually I'll come back to this? But did you have that kind of rationality when you left Lightspeed?
Candidly, and this is where maybe Ben's question is more relevant, I just didn't know how hard it would be. I thought I'm an immigrant. I became a senior a GP at a firm like Lightspeed within 10 years of arriving here. I'll go out and people will fund me, right? I candidly did not know that it was hard. I think COVID complicated matters a lot in very tactical ways. I can go into it, but it would probably be too boring for this podcast. But so one is I just didn't know. Second is I gave myself this timeline that I can go without a salary for 5-6 years. So I kind of built my own balance sheet in the years before with this idea that whatever management fee I'll get, I'll invest in the firm's growth and stuff. And so I just didn't assume that I won't be able to raise Fund One. What I did want to have a backup plan is, what if I completely fail? I raise a couple of funds, thing doesn't go anywhere. I'm 45 by then I'm really in a tight spot, right? A year old, and nobody's.
You're still in the first half of your life at 45.
Yeah, so I did think of that as the big risk. That I do. The risk is not immediate failure. I did not assume I would immediately fail. The risk is slow failure, and actually that is the worst kind of failure, even for entrepreneurs that we back, where they're all talented people. Some ideas work, some don't. It's when they end up spending 7-8 years and then it doesn't work. Then it takes out 7-8 years of their life. That was the risk I was personally taking, I thought. But again, I felt like, look, it's like Jeff Bezos's regret minimization framework, right? What will I regret more? Not doing it or doing it and failing? And look, at some level though, I will say, like, once you're in it, at least I approach it as like, I'm already in the arena. There's no other option. I have to fucking win it. There's no other option. Like, there's no point thinking about failure. The only point of thinking about failure modes is more thinking of failure modes and then finding fixes to it. But can't let your psyche get bogged down by what if I fail. It's irrelevant as a question.
Effectively, there is no plan B.
Plan B will come when plan B will come. Like, yeah,
right.
Like, I'll
You're not
figure it
planning
out.
for plan B when plan A is being executed.
Yes.
Not
on this one, at least.
I'm curious, there's something you mentioned very early on, which actually teases and leads itself to the next kind of question, which is, question for you, Ben. What ended up helping you pull the trigger on Nakul? But as Nakul mentioned earlier, you guys didn't come in at Fund 1. You came in at Fund 2.
Let's stop talking about that part.
Hey, we want to unearth this, right? This is an educational experience for all of us. We're going to make this into an HBS case study. But I'm curious for you, was the relationship too new, or were there certain hesitations that you had that you needed to see before investing? The
opportunity, once we spent time with Nakul, there were many things that were obvious that distinguished himself from 95% of the other things out there. He had demonstrated the ability to generate significant returns in early stage venture. Demonstrated track record. A real reason why he wanted to do what he was doing, a real drive, a differentiation for why he was building it at a new thing versus why not. Did you fail out of the last thing, or are you actually going to actually greener pastures where there's something new that you could only do as a new thing? All those things are true. We just didn't know Nakul yet. And one of the biggest challenges of COVID was, while Nakul could do 10 meetings in a day because you don't have to drive around, those meetings are all, this way, and we don't get, and when you spend, when Nakul's not on a podcast, but actually in person, there's multiple orders of magnitude more that you get out of building relationship and trust, and you actually understand and appreciate the intentionality and determination. We saw it on Zoom, but there's only so much you can get that way. So we intentionally slowed down new things during the Zoom timeframe because we knew that it was going to be hard to build authentic relationships that we intend, once we start, we're going to be in it for 10 plus years. So we did make the mistake of not investing in Fund 1, which Nakul won't let us forget. But by the time Fund 2 came around, Nakul mentioned my partner, Jesse. Jesse and Nakul in particular were very intentional about spending time together, not during the fundraise process. And again, I think Nakul, you and Jesse enjoyed each other's company, but also Nakul's not doing it just to be a nice guy. He's got the intentionality and determination. He knew that there was a plan, and we feel grateful. You chose us. I don't think you did that with everybody. You chose who you wanted to spend more time with. But that was a process where we knew that we wanted to do it over a period of time, and we used that Fund 1 timeframe to actually develop that relationship more. And eventually, the in-person part helped a lot.
Yeah. I actually like in retrospect again, now that LP-GP relationships are built best in person and over a longer time horizon, because they're betting on us often for a couple funds together, right? So because funds don't really show up with their greatness or their shit show till year 4, 5, 6. Really, it's not clear. It's often LPs who are really institutional, like Ben and his team, they're betting for like a 12, 15-year relationship. So of course it makes sense to take the time to get to know each other. And that's where I think COVID was. I underestimated even then as to how much of a problem that was. Secondly, again, really enjoyed meeting the team, really enjoyed the mission-driven nature. So they were one of the few people I stayed in touch. And to their credit, before we kicked off fundraise, they'd done the IC and made the commitment before we formally kicked off the raise. So in second fund, they helped me create the momentum I had going into the fundraise.
We try not to make the same mistake twice.
That's smart. That is smart. I'm curious if we were to backpedal a little bit. Nakul, I would love to place yourself in the time of when you got the "Let's Talk Next Fund" email from Ben, Jesse, and the team at Next Legacy. What was going on through your head at that point? And what did you resolve yourself to in terms of building that relationship with Legacy at the time going forward?
Yeah, I think so. We kicked off fund raise in April 2020. Took a full year to raise, which was again longer than I had expected. And at some level, it was ego bruising and has put a permanent chip on my shoulder. That it's good, because like in life, if you have this good runs, once in a while you need a punch in the gut to keep yourself humble and also give you more chips for the future. So that was good. So I think after we closed Fund 1, maybe I took a 6 to 12 month breather on LP stuff and just wanted to focus. And this year has been same. Since March, I've spent less than 5% of my time on LP stuff and focused fully on just building the firm, because that's where the actual value is. And then maybe 12 months in, I don't recall whether it was Jesse initiated or I initiated, but they did a great job reconnecting. So it wasn't a formal email. It was more like, hey, we've got this done. This is where the team is. Would love to give you the update. They were open. I visited their offices multiple times in Palo Alto, met the broader team, went to the events. And so it felt very organic. Honestly, it didn't feel like a process, for me at least, on my side.
I'll mention also that you're, at the time it was MZ, that was your partner. Sam hadn't joined yet, and so Nakul saying we, and you're a small partnership. You intended to build something small, but your partner MZ was part of that relationship building. We actually had met MZ when he was at Kleiner earlier, but didn't know him well, and so we got to know him also during that process.
And I'm curious, and this I might be attributing a lot more weight here than there might be, but Nakul mentioned that Ben, you and the team kind of invited him to a lot of events and all these kind of things. I imagine these audiences are fairly curated. What was in your mind, probably till this day, like, what is the quality bar that you were looking for invites when it comes to GPs and other attendees?
Yeah, I think we're looking, when we put together, we like to do something called a Jeffersonian dinner, and Nakul's been to some where, and Nakul's partner MZ has been to some where, where we try to, and there's a baseline of accomplishment and capability that needs to be in the room, and that's obvious. But then we're additionally looking for individuals who are just curious and want to engage in a conversation. There are many successful GPs that we work with who just want to talk, which doesn't make for a great conversation. And Nakul and MZ are both great examples of folks who actually are engaged in listening as much as they are kind of sharing into the conversation.
And MZ knew Ryan also from before, your partner, before joining Audacious. So all of those multiple, I think, touch points helped.
And I'll give a shout out as well. Nakul, I've spent the last week and some change reading every single article that I could that you've written. And it just goes to show, and I highly, highly recommend this, how thoughtful you are in your writing as well, and how thoughtful you are with kind of founder interactions, which is honestly, and Ben can corroborate on this, is rare in the GP world.
I wouldn't say it's that rare. I think, the high quality VCs, which are several of them, our competition is real. It's a good group of highly talented, smart, driven people, and I think there's amongst the GPs that I respect, and there are, again, many of them, it's not just I'm saying 5, like there's a clear acknowledgement that, the founder is the source of everything that follows from in Silicon Valley. And so I'm glad you read somewhere or heard that we are respectful and we aspire to that. But that founder experience is extremely important. It's the starting point of what we do.
Well, I will say, like, at least in my reading, it wasn't explicitly written that you were respectful and thoughtful. It was just thematically, as I was reading it, and the tonality in which you used when expressing those ideas, it just felt very down to earth and candid.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad it came across that way. And, every time, again, I have these two sides. I'm naturally shy, and then I've become this person who speaks up more. Every time I'm writing an article, I always am thinking, hey, will this come across as something that is prescriptive in a way that doesn't understand the founder's situation? Because every startup journey is different. So there's no formula to startup success. If there was one, everybody would adopt it. And so I try to make sure there's, like, at least I'm glad the tonality comes across, because I'm thinking that way, that I don't want to be the kind of person who says, this is how you do it. And because that would be unempathetic to the founder who's reading it. Second, it would be blatantly wrong. There's no one way to do it. You can only provide ideas, not a formula.
That makes sense. I do want to call on something that you've mentioned a couple times, and that you're on the shyer side. And one thing I'm really curious on, as you mentioned earlier, you and your team kind of started fundraising April 2020, took you a year to close. You closed in 2021. This is the height of venture. This is the height of tech. Everyone is out there talking about themselves on every single platform out there. And I've read previously, and you can't trust everything you read on the internet, so feel free to correct me, but was there rhyme and reason why you all intentionally decided to keep a very low profile during that period of time?
Yeah, so I'd say there were two broad reasons. One is that both MZ and I believed, and this was something that we came together on, as in it may have been one of the core ingredients that allowed us to relate to each other. We believe that VC is more about the ground game than the air game. The real high quality deal flow gets referred via the Whisper network based on your existing relationships, or through you hustling even on LinkedIn to find out which amazing engineers and leaders are leaving to start companies. The winning happens in one-on-one meetings, not over Twitter, right? And and the references that your founders will provide in that one-on-one phone call where you're not even present. So we felt like one is that the high quality venture game is more about the ground game than the air game. And so we felt confident that we had it in us to win that way. So we felt like, hey, why bother with creating that additional noise? And I think in retrospect, I again feel like it was important for us to shut out the noise of all the craziness that happens on Twitter and not have the DNA of chasing likes. It's important to set in the DNA to yourselves and your employees that, hey, we are a venture firm. We are not a media firm. Each of us are not individually trying to be celebrities here. We are in the business of finding amazing founders, moving the needle for them enough that their odds of success increased, even if slightly, because of partnering with us. And hopefully that then creates the flywheel back to sourcing and winnability. So we both felt very much that all of this that I just said is more about the ground game. The higher quality stuff moves on the ground game, including like recruiting, right? Like you could put up a LinkedIn posting on some recruiting. Yes, you might get 3 amazing people coming inbound, but you might get 300 okay people. But often, like MZ and I knew each other since 2014 before he joined, right? And Sam, our talent partner, the way I found her was I asked 10 of our CEOs and the Lightspeed talent team and others, who are the best recruiters you work with? They told me first the names of the firms, and then I asked them, but no, tell me the superstar in those recruiting firms. They gave me the exact name. I wouldn't have found that on Twitter, and she wouldn't have applied. She was doing so well in her career. MZ, I had to poach him out, right? The best people are doing well, including founders. So one is the ground game piece. The second reason was we wanted to build the reputation of the firm on actual like substantial body of work. And we felt like if we do that, we create that noise on day zero, we'll really be creating noise around our maybe backgrounds and stuff, but not about what Audacious brings to the world, which in our case is recruiting superpowers for the CEO. By the beginning of this year, we felt ready. We had placed 40 plus people. Now we've placed 70 people, or at least 70 offers out from our portfolio companies through our work. We had created a platform where we felt like, okay, now we are ready to talk about our body of work. And I felt that was more authentic to our way of doing things. And our senior team, Sam, MZ, and I aligned on that way of thinking. So there's no one, somebody else might choose a different formula and might work for them. For us, this was how it felt.
I will emphasize that, Nakul, you started Audacious, you launched Audacious into the pandemic. None of us could have known at the time nor what it was going to be. And it happened to be that's also a time where venture went crazy and a lot of discipline went out the window. A lot of dollars were invested, strategies were shifted, and because things are different now, the world's different. And you developed a plan before that version of the world, a thesis on how to build a firm, as well as an investment strategy and pacing. And you went out and did that. In hindsight, if we were still in 2021, you might be thinking back, wondering, oh, maybe I should adapt it, right? But I think it's remarkable that you were so intentional and you stuck to that plan and worked through it and actually executed it in that context. It's one thing to do what you say you're going to do, which actually most GPs don't end up doing because they don't realize how hard it's going to be. You said what you're going to do, you went and did it during a time when a lot of venture actually changed their strategy, their portfolio construction. So by the time that it came to talking about Fund 2, when we look back, it was particularly notable that kind of all that you had accomplished during that time.
Yeah, thanks for again saying that. Always feels you have a little bit more of a bird's eye view to our work, so it's great to see that you can see that. I'd say there are small things that get edited, and you have to, because you have to adapt to the realities, and the market is changing, so the reality itself is changing. So as an example, we had always said we would be on a 3-year deployment period. We ended up on a 4-year deployment period. We've raised Fund 2. We raised it in March. We've still not opened it. And the reason is we felt like 2021 was a crazy year of deployment. And we were like, well, we don't know when it will crash. But the worst point it can crash is when we deployed Fund 1 fully and then the market crashes. Then we are really in a bad spot, right? So we were like, let's just slow it down. And the second reason we slowed it down a little bit was we just felt like, for any new firm, I think this is true. the first year you get started, you're bringing a lot of your reputations and your network, but the brand recognition in the market just grows with every subsequent investment you make and every subsequent year of existence, right? And so I just felt like by year 3 and 4, we'll be on the steady state of all the things that we want to make happen. And now I feel that way. So we slowed down our deployment slightly, even more than what we had anticipated, when at that time most people were deploying in 2 years. I think where we really stuck to our knitting was ownership mindset. So backing off on things where we feel like, hey, we love the founder, we love the market, but it's not enough ownership for our business model to work. And I think we did a disciplined job on that front. And just maybe, I think the thing that I'm probably the most proud of is the culture at the firm. Like, I think it's a very, very driven team. Now we have 8 people. Everybody wakes up to kill it. I can say that very easily and very proudly because I think it's true. And I think that's MZ and Sam, not just me, who drive that culture on a daily basis. And, they're self-driven people. So I think that is another thing that we thought on day zero, that we want a firm that plays that way. And one of the values of the firm, which we wrote down on the first day that MZ, Sam and I did a Zoom together, we wrote down the core guiding principles and the values of the firm. And I'll mention 2, which might seem at odds, but are very important to us. One is play to win on the value side. And so point is like, hey, we don't want to be a top 20 firm. For our stage of the founder, we want to be the firm that they think of. And so we need to put in the foundation, all the ingredients that in 5 years, 7 years, people think of us that way on the founder side. And so play to win, don't play for second place, don't play for a respectable place. There's only one slot to win on any situation that we are tackling. At odds with that is we put in on day zero, one of our values is always remember there's a human on the other side of every conversation. Where, especially this is towards our own teammates and our founders. These people are creating or trying to create multi-billion-dollar companies. It's a very, very stressful job, and we want them to grow fast. It's easy for VCs to sometimes say, hey, why is it not growing faster? Well, you have to remember there's a human on the other side of every equation. Same for our own team. We want all our teammates to do more and more. But at some point, you have to realize everybody has a family. They have their own psyche management. They have their own health to take care of. Everybody needs recharging of the batteries. So those are the things I feel the most proud of. Other tactical plans get edited.
I'm curious, you mentioned, Nakul, like these 2 things are seemingly at odds, play to win versus there's a human on the side of the other side of the conversation. How do you choose to balance it? And at points when those things come at odds, like how do you resolve which one should take priority?
It's a great question. And, I don't have a simple answer because, I do believe greatness comes out of pushing hard. I'd say the first piece is if you are disciplined about working with self-motivated people and driven people, on their worst day, they are pushing themselves very hard, and your job is to reduce the stress in that conversation. So if something is not working in, let's say, in our talent team, or, my job is to assure us, hey, we are putting in the ingredients, let's focus on the action items, but also assure that, hey, I can see that you guys are putting all the work. It'll happen. It just needs like this one thing where we need to break through this problem, right? And so you kind of bring it to the problem. You're still being truthful in that discussion to the problem statement that exists, but being also respectful that we understand that not all things work. Sometimes it needs iteration, and we acknowledge that you are putting everything to solve this problem. I think the worst case is, again, the tonality matters, and the body language matters, is where a problem didn't get solved and you blame the person versus you remain on the problem statement. That is what I meant by there's a human at the other side of every equation.
I also want to realize that when we cognizant of time, in the sense that there's so much good stuff to cover here. I do want to scratch my own personal itch, though, as is the reason I started this podcast. One of the things I always get really, really curious about are how pitches differ from LP to LP. And I am extremely curious, and Ben, you can corroborate what that pitch actually sounded like when you first heard it. But Nakul, how does the pitch differ when you're pitching someone like Deb Liu, who is phenomenal as she is, to the pitch you give Ben, who comes from more institutional kind of background?
Yeah, I think, look, when individuals invest, they care less about things like portfolio construction, pacing, or even competition. They are investing primarily on us, MZ, Sam, and me in our case, and our drive and our reputations as individuals, and maybe our taste profile in types of businesses and founders, versus somebody like Ben is saying, hey, all of that is good, but does that equate to you having the right to run a $150 million fund or whatever size, right? Because some of these things are great as potential engines. Let's say I'm a hustler, I have good taste profile, I have some value that I can bring. Okay, you have the right to run a $25 million fund, cool. Can you win the deal? So I think some individuals are betting more on you'll figure it out. If I'm feeling like you're one of the top 1% of individuals, you'll figure it out. Whatever gets them excited about us. Versus for Ben, I think it is important to be judicious on, or at least I think so. Like, hey, okay, all of this is good, but again, Nakul's competition is very, very good too. So why does Audacious have a right to win these deals, right? And then will they be able to understand that portfolio construction relies on both shots at goal and ownership, which can also be at odds with each other sometimes. So there's much more that somebody like a Ben is looking at, is my understanding at least. But Ben would know much more.
No, I think that everybody's different, including institutional LPs, and so that we're all coming from our persona, our constraints, and our opportunities. I suspect one of the largest differences is, between the first day that we met Nakul, and then when we, as Next Legacy, committed to Fund 2, we looked at 550 other managers' fund, and so most individuals, even if they're prolific and do lots of investing with their network, they didn't look at 500 plus. 200 plus 100, just the volume and scale of focus on venture GPs is just different from an institutional LP than an individual. So their decision making, and I actually don't know Deb's specific decision making, but there generally is going to be, do I want to invest in this or not? Not, is this going to be the one of the 10 I'm going to do, and I'm going to invest in this for the next 10 years. Like, that's also usually not in the math. And I imagine for you as a GP, you are also thinking about your LP base the same way. You probably don't have a lot of your LP base dollars wise from individuals, because generally they're not thinking about it from an institutional relationship standpoint.
Yeah, I think the value of the individual investor like Deb, who's been phenomenal, right? So Deb is now an advisor and an angel in one of our portfolio companies. Like, we do our quasi-board meetings, there's no formal board, in Ancestry.com's office. So, and she's just been a phenomenal unlocker of that founder's journey. So the value of having somebody like a Deb in the Audacious fund is less for the money. It's more for us to benefit from her network, her insights. She is just amazing, by the way. So, having her involved in Audacious is like a huge unlock for us. Versus with Ben and team, it's like, they constitute bulk of our funds. We wouldn't exist without them. 15
minutes with Deb is worth a lot more than however much she might have invested in Audacious. But I think what Nakul isn't saying is the money from us as an LP is actually what matters. 15 minutes with us not so valuable.
But again, that's where I would say, just to complete that thought to its fullness, that's where I do personally care about Legacy's day zero positioning to us, at least, which is, hey, who are you? you're working with. And hopefully the founders in our portfolio will also care about it over time.
We're in the back half here getting ready for the curtain call. So I'm going to go through a series of quick fire round questions, largely because I think these are fun. We're going to take a step back from venture. Actually, Ben, I may ask you a venture question, but nevertheless, maybe we'll start with Nakul first. Two things here. One, in all my homework here, you are married to a very prolific home decor blogger. And if you're listening to this, you're missing out on the visual experience here. So I'd highly recommend checking out the visual experience on Spotify or YouTube, because then you can actually see Nakul's background. I kid you not, when he logged on, we're using Riverside here. I don't think Riverside has virtual backgrounds. I thought he was on a virtual background. I was trying to figure out how he created that. So the question to you, Nakul, is how is being married to a prolific home blogger, and many of our posts helped shape the way I think about home office in the last 2 weeks as well, how has that changed the way you think about investing or building an institution?
Yeah, I'll just correct one small thing. She was a prolific home blogger till we did not have work authorization for her. After that, she's become a professional interior designer, and she now runs her own interior design firm called An Affair with Color. So check it out.
I stand corrected.
Nevertheless, what's the website?
What's the website?
Anafairwithcolor.com. But to answer your question, I think I'm pretty spoiled on my expectations of decor from every space I enter now. So I've become super picky about the coffee shops or the bars or the restaurants I spend time in, and where that has impacted, I think, or where I bring it in my work is that I care a lot about the Audacious experience as it's being delivered to the founder in the physical space that we are meeting them and stuff. So it's one is just in our own, I'm very, very conscious of that experience that somebody has of Audacious based on where they are seeing us or where they are meeting us. The second piece probably is if you look at our logo on the website, and we don't have a big website and stuff, but our fundraising decks, which Ben has seen probably, there is a little bit of boldness that it has enabled me to take. Our website is black and gold. Our fundraising deck is black and gold. Most VCs would say, hey, you're in the money management business, be a little more conservative. I think my wife's presence in my life has emboldened me on taking those stances to create the distinctiveness of the Audacious brand.
Let me do a follow-up to that, because you mentioned that you're extremely picky with bars, coffee shops, as well as restaurants you go to. So if you can name one of each, favorite coffee shop, favorite bar, favorite restaurant in San Francisco or elsewhere that you really enjoy because of their decor.
So I think in San Francisco, I'll mention quickly since those are top of mind. For coffee shop, there used to be pre-COVID, and it got shut down, a coffee shop called Vive Le Tart, which was just an insane experience. It is all white and very high ceilings, and half of that they had reserved for just the bakery behind. So you could sit there and see the bakers in the bakery baking happening. And it was just a phenomenal experience. It got shut down. Now my favorite coffee shop is St. Frank on Polk Street. When you can find me almost every Sunday there for 2-3 hours preparing for the week ahead. It's just amazing.
I gotta chime in. I gotta chime in because St. Frank, my best friend since we were 10 was one of the co-founders of St. Frank.
Oh wow!
And because we used to describe high ceilings, all white, they have a mural on the wall that's from Babette's Feast, which is one of my favorite movies since we were in college together, since we were roommates in college, and it's all about the extravagance of somebody who's good at what they do and practicing their art. In this case, she was a chef, and practicing it and kind of sharing it with the people you care about, the people you love. So so St. Frank's, I love the coffee shop, but also the philosophy behind it is something that is very important to me. So, St. Frank.
I'm going to take my coffee meetings there now.
Yeah, you should.
What about a bar and a restaurant? I won't let you go. Bar and a restaurant.
Yeah, on bars, I'd say I love the Battery, which is kind of the Soho House of SF. So it's a membership club, but I think one of the best designed places in SF. The Virgin Hotel, which I think now has been rebranded to something, they have an amazing lobby. Moongate Lounge, which is which is in Chinatown, or I think, Mr. Ju. It's basically above Mr. Ju's. Phenomenal lounge area.
I love it. I'm taking note. This is where I'm going to spend the next couple of weeks on. So I may find you there, Nakul. And maybe this won't come out in the next couple of weeks, but in due time, obviously, as we are addressed in Christmas, if you guys are around there, this is where you can meet the guests. So, question for you, Ben. One thing I've noticed, I've never asked you this, but it has been on our list of questions for quite a while in terms of questions I'd love to ask you, which is I've noticed during my research, and this may be due to availability bias of what pictures are actually out in the internet. And if this hits a dead end, I'll take full responsibility here. But as someone with what I imagine to have a sock drawer as colorful as the night sky on the 4th of July, what makes a pair of socks deserving of indictment to the Ben Choi drawer of socks?
Wow.
It's a good question. I met an entrepreneur once who walked on stage with really bright shoes, and what he said resonated with me. It's my personal style philosophy, which is when you have an understated personality, wear something really bright. So I'm definitely an understated kind of guy. So between socks or shoes, and it's changed over the years, I give myself kind of license down there, right? The rest of me is kind of more consistent with being a little understated. But I've always had a little bit of I've been happy to have a little bit of color down on my feet.
I was about to say, I was like, what happened to the Christmas sweater?
Yeah.
I love it. As we round things out here, maybe my last question for both of you, but I'll give complete credit to Ben in the kind of email thread we had before this. I'm really curious for both of you because both of you have been in adjacent and or in the venture world for quite a while at this point. And I'll make it broad, but it's a very simple question. I think it'll holistically, end our Christmas episode here. But why do the both of you still like venture? And Ben, maybe I'll start with you first because you're the one who seeded that question, and then I'll go to Nakul after.
Venture is just this incredible industry, and Nakul referenced this earlier, where there's constant creation. No one can be in this industry and just hang out and continue to be successful. It requires constant work and self-improvement, but it also is done. Very rarely is it is success a single person's story, and I'm wired a bit. I think it's my parents' story. I'm wired to be around people and serve other people, and so venture is an industry that allows us to collaborate, be helpful. We compete occasionally, but we also, the same people we compete with, we also help each other, and we can cheer on each other's success. So that's what I continue to love about venture, that it's always changing and that we can do it in a collaborative way.
I'd say the thing that I'm most curious in my life in general is just greatness in human journeys, or great human journeys, and human scalability. If I wasn't doing venture, I'd probably just go around the world interviewing insanely great people and write essays on them. And that just the idea that two people can be born with similar IQs, similar characteristics, and one becomes a VP and an MD at D. Shaw, which is where Jeff Bezos was before he started Amazon, and the other person becomes the founder of Amazon and creates this thing, is just mind-blowingly fascinating to me, and what the ingredients went into it. So, and I feel lucky that I ended up in a profession where that itch and that curiosity is satisfied literally on a daily basis for me. So for me, it's that is it. Ability to hang with these unbelievably driven people and understand their journeys and what will scale them 10 years from now. What will go into their scalability is the most fascinating thing, which is an endless fascination of mine.
There is this dream that I have, to echo both of you, to see a Ted Lasso-like TV show for the world of venture. I would love, if I ever become casting director, I would love to cast both of you in that show, because both of you are the reasons why venture exists and why it will continue to persist over a very long time. But as we round things out here, I want to thank both of you. As the last question, and Ben, you know this as well, you guys are both on a lot of places. Where's the best place for people to find you if they wanted to, talk to you, LPs asking you for advice, or just other GPs in the mix or other folks in the mix who are just inspired by what they heard today in today's episode? Nakul, maybe we'll go with you first.
Okay. You mean how to reach me, right? Like, I'd say, my email, nakul@audacious.co. I'm like an hourly active user of my email. Otherwise, Twitter, those two places.
And if I might put it out there, possibly St. Frank's as well.
Oh yeah, Sunday night.
Possibly St. Frank's as well, every weekend, every Sunday.
Yeah, for me, it's benandnextlegacy.com, or it's on LinkedIn. I think the way Nakul and I met, though, was through a common friend who we really respect. And so if we don't know each other yet, finding that way or spending time with people who are one click away, I think that's where to spend time.
I'll take it. Both of you are absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing Christmas episode. And so I want to thank you both for everything that's been shared today.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. And thanks, Ben, for organizing this.
Of course.
Thank you.
And so to all like the Superclusters fans out there, have a wonderful Christmas, a happy New Year. We'll see you right after the holidays. But until the next, talk soon.
No, it was well done, and the questions were amazing. And I will say you did a lot of research.
I want to give a special shout out to today's sponsor, Alchemist Accelerator. Backed by the likes of Coastal Ventures, Mayfield, Salesforce, just to name a few, Alchemist is the top B2B startup accelerator that's been around since 2012, backing founders from day one. And if you've been around for 12 years and running laser focused only on one industry, you build this incredible set of flywheels, and positive feedback loop is absolutely insane. We back the best enterprise talent who go on to change the world in which we live in, who then come back to their hometown, coach, and mentor the next generation of world-class enterprise talent. And don't take it just from me. Alchemist has backed the likes of LaunchDarkly, Rigetti, Privacera, MoEngage, FarmWise, just to name a few, many of which who have come back as mentors and coaches for the current classes of Alchemist. If you're curious and want to get more involved in the Alchemist ecosystem, check out alchemistaccelerator.com/superclusters. That's an S at the beginning and S at the end, and we'll include the link in the show notes below. Till next, stay awesome. It's David from Post here, and if you're tuning in from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts find your ear, it'd mean the world to me if you left a review. For those from the YouTube universe, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments, and it'd mean a lot to me if you could share this episode with just one other person who'd get a kick out of today's topics. I'm on the road to publishing to at least 100 episodes of Superclusters, so every comment, question, review helps me make this experience more helpful, exciting, and fun for you. And lastly, I want to share a quick disclaimer. The views expressed in this episode are for informational purposes only and are solely the views of myself and the guest alone. They are not representative of Alchemist Accelerator. None of the views expressed herein constitute legal, investment, business, or tax advice. Any allusions or references to funds or companies are for illustrative purposes only and should not be relied upon as investment recommendations. Consult a professional investment advisor prior to making any investment decisions. And that's all from me. See you on the next.